Hoffman's Hot Seat. I'm Tom Hoffman with One-to-One Media, and today I'm joined by Laef Olson, Chief Information Officer at RightNow. We'll be talking about public versus private cloud computing concerns with customer data. Laef, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, Tom.
Laef, what types of customer data do RightNow's clients prefer to manage in, say, a private cloud setting versus the public cloud?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Tom. We work with clients all around the world with a variety of different preferences in this regard. We've had really good success in building solutions that meet their security and privacy requirements. However, I will say that there are some situations where they definitely prefer a private cloud setting, and it actually is driven more by enterprise architecture. One of the things that I work with client CIOs on is, what is the right way to deploy a cloud solution, and what are the things that you need to do when you're managing that? And we always go back to enterprise architecture, and we talk about the various components of the enterprise architecture. We talk about, what are their core business systems, things that are, driving, their underlying business. In my previous stint at Orbitz, a core business system example would be our booking engine, for example. And then we talk about back office systems, front office systems. We tend to sit very much in the front office camp and with the RightNow CX solution, and that tends to be kind of a customer-facing related issue. And so one of the things that I find with CIOs is when it's a core business system, when it's something that they're using to differentiate their core business, it provides them with a unique sort of underlying competitive advantage. They prefer to manage that themselves internally, not to say that it can't be in a co-location facility or somewhere off-premise, but under their direct control. When it comes into like a RightNow CX solution, which is front office, customer-facing, there's a whole series of concerns which are raised there around PII data, HIPAA-related data, e-commerce-related data, and those require specific controls and mitigations that could happen in a private cloud setting, but could also happen in a public cloud setting. And frankly, it's RightNow's ability to meet those needs cloud setting that provides us with some interesting differentiation in the space.
Interesting. This may play into a discussion around architecture, but what do you find are the top concerns that RightNow's customers have expressed regarding the storing of customer data in the public cloud?
Well, cloud computing, as you know, Tom, is a super hyped concept, and so there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, confusion about what can be done, what can't be done. And so one of the things that I try to do is just demystify the concepts and really bucket those concerns into a few key areas. Probably the biggest and most important concern to address is this idea of loss of control, right? So IT organizations over the last 30 to 40 years have built up a lot of internal processes that help them manage the data that is important to them. And when you move it off-premise, and that was something that happened, 10, 15 years ago as we moved into co-location facilities where the specialty was for, power and cooling management, we had to sort of address those concerns where the actual, data center building wasn't on company property. And now that it's moved up the stack into the application space, there's a whole bunch of additional loss of control related concerns. And some of the ones that I hear on a regular basis is, what about data accessibility? This data is out in the cloud. Do I actually own my data? Can I get access to it when I wanted to? I was actually just emailing a client this morning about that very question. They just wanted to know, can I get the data whenever I want to get it? Things about, integration capabilities. When it's on-premise, when you control your servers, you can sort of manage the integration to the API or maybe even build a custom integration against the database model. And that's a concern that I see regarding loss of control. Change management, right? There's changes happening in the cloud. There are operations teams and engineering teams that I'm responsible for managing. And traditionally, IT has done that themselves. And so having that change management function be now on a services basis is sometimes a challenge that they need to get their mind around and their arms around. Cloud computing is traditionally multi-tenant. In fact, that's one of the key aspects of it. That multi-tenancy drives a control concern around what about system performance? Do other clients impact my system performance, and how do we manage that? Another one that comes to mind that we hear a lot about is the big changes, right? So there's a new version of the cloud computing environment that's coming out. Do I get to control that and manage when I accept that upgrade of the software base that's in the cloud, or does it just happen on a Frankenstein switch that just gets thrown? And then, some basic blocking and tackling functions about, how do I do user acceptance testing and quality assurance testing in the environment if it's in the cloud. That first category, loss of control, I think is one of the biggest ones that I hear about. A second category is what I call lack of an adequate service level agreement. The whole idea of service was not as much a part of the paradigm, right? It was mostly software that you were getting. And there's a few aspects here, right? Because I think most cloud computing companies are now offering SLAs, but the question is, do they offer them in a way that are easily consumed by an IT organization, right? So this ability to self-select the level of SLA that you want, basically the ability to buy up into a higher service level agreement, higher level availability, shorter response times, those types of things is very important because different organizations have different requirements on mission criticality. The lack of real guarantees or teeth in an SLA, right? So if it doesn't have the right teeth, a lot of times it's difficult to see how an IT organization's interests are very highly aligned with cloud computing providers' interests. And putting those teeth into an SLA drives that alignment. Sometimes the targets are inadequate, right? So a pretty common target in the industry is 99.5, and I've interacted with companies that actually try to drive a lower target, which is just a huge amount availability, downtime potential. And so kind of goes back to that first point, can you buy up to a higher one? And then finally, and I think one of the most important aspects, cloud computing is new. And when it comes to service level agreements, it's one thing to promise it. It's another thing to actually deliver on that promise over time. And a lot of that delivery is inherent in the architecture. And it's one of the benefits RightNow has of being in the business for 10 years and having a long history of performance. It's easier to sit down and talk with an IT organization about our service level agreements when we have, a chart that goes back several years that shows really good availability and performance. The last one I'll just briefly touch on that I run across a lot is risk management. And I think about this in both in legal, regulatory, and operational risk. Lots of concerns about their data in respect to, disaster recovery, business continuity, compliance certifications, and third-party audits of the environment, big area that we engage with on. And then finally, just information security risk. And as I mentioned, our information security practices, one of our fastest growing areas just because of the demands of our client base and the types of proof points that they need to put into the marketplace.
With respect to that, going back to the first point, what are some steps that RightNow is taken with customers to address those concerns around loss control?
Sure. Control is an interesting one because IT organizations are actually fairly used to working on a services relationship. We do that with our co-location providers in the data center. We do that with our telecommunications providers as well. And cloud computing just moves that a little bit further up the stack, and you have to address some of the unique needs there. And so one of the programs I've started at RightNow is something that I refer to as the virtual CIO program. And what this basically means is our commitment to both operational transparency and operational excellence. And by transparency, I mean that while obtaining all of your services in the cloud, you don't have the actual hands on the dials type of control that you would have if it's on premise. It is important, I think, in order to effectively manage risk or deal with the loss of control issue, to be able to see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And so we actually have a virtual CIO portal that allows our clients to log in and see the types of changes that are going on in the environment, including who's actually making those changes, who approved them, etc. And then provide input. I've gotten input on changes that are happening in our EMEA data center, for example, from one of our very large telecommunications companies. And we were actually able to address that for them without a lot of disruption to our service just by moving a date of a change request that they had asked for. And so we're able to do that on a case-by-case basis without a lot of disruption of service. So transparency is very important. I refer to it as the ability to sort of consume the behind-the-scenes services that we're providing for them on a day-to-day basis. And then the last thing, of course, is that if you are transparent and you do provide that type of visibility into the environment, you have to be buttoned up, right? I mean, I can't be, running a sloppy IT organization or an operations organization behind the scenes. And so that commitment to operational excellence around driving very consistent change management processes, security processes, having all of the controls in place that drive that really helps to mitigate that concern about loss of control that we've heard about it.
Well, Laef, thanks so much for sharing these insights with me on these cloud-related issues that are so top of mind for so many CIOs and decision makers.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
To learn more about relationship strategy, visit www.one2onemedia.com.